ठीक है,
Fantastic.
continue.
Right, sorry about this technical glitch. My name is Khalid. I'm based out of Karachi, Pakistan, and it's a great pleasure to be part of this Global Supply Chain Excellence Summit. I think I'm doing it for the third time now, and thank you, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Saab. Uh, is the sound clear?
It's very clear. Please proceed.
Oh, fantastic. Right. So today's topic is very, very important. As you can see, and this picture was actually done by AI, and it is showing a supply chain and finance people and marketing people working together in collaboration. And it is so important in a large and complex organization. The supply chain work becomes very, very complex, and it is very important that they work with sales, marketing, finance people to make the business plan. So the demand planning is the starting point, which is done in the before the SNOP process. Uh, and so today my topic is to restrict. It's a huge topic because supply chain is a huge uh, activity, right from end to end, from demand planning right to customer's door. And it is the same complexity as in supply chain finance also. But today I'm going to be focusing on how to optimize supply chain finance. It's also called SCF, and and the whole idea is that to maximize cash throughout the organization through. So that's next slide. So the only two areas that I'm going to be covering today is one is the introduction to supply chain finance, and the second part of the presentation is about an overview of the key areas in supply chain where we can optimize the finance investment in those finance activity that is happening. So and you would see from this diagram that finance is engaged in finance investment, or the company's capital allocation is in raw material. Um, Part of it is offset by supplier financing. Then you need manufacturing assets, you need distribution and logistics, and then you have retail and customers whereby you are collecting your cash from. We'll be talking about more about this. But before I do that, one of the basic principles is in finance is to maximize cash flow. Cash flow is actually used by a lot of people in the organization and outside the organization to value the organization. So the more cash you generate, the more valuable your company is. So one of my boss from Unilever India, who was the group CFO, his quotation is that sales is vanity, that it's very nice to say that you are a 10 billion or 20 billion or 500 billion company, but but he said that profit is sanity and cash is reality. So I still, whenever I'm telling somebody about finance, I quote his quotation that cash is the ultimate. So every outcome of the business transaction is that you must end up with cash, and is important when you're making policies and when you are negotiating. It is very, very important to understand when is the cash is going to be received. Next is I'm just showing upstream and downstream of supply chain, and whereby cash is involved. So when you are buying raw materials, when you are doing inbound logistics, shipping charges, etc., warehousing, production, finished goods storage, logistics, and when you're selling it out to marketing and customer service. So this is um, a detailed flow. One of the more common flow of value chain is in this diagram, whereby you're showing inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, and here is the head office. So this is the factory side generally, and this is the marketing and sales side. Up up here is the head office. Normally, they provide infrastructure, technology, procurement services, HR services, finance services, etc. So indeed, but even here, the supply chain is engaged. Like in infrastructure, you have the manufacturing facilities. In the technology and development, you have product R&D. Procurement is all about raw material and packing material and services. And in HR, of course, you need people to run your planning, manufacturing, and logistics. So overall, one of the biggest cost in any organization is its supply chain cost that needs to be managed. So if you look at this diagram, it's showing that about approximately 60% of the total organization cost is for supply chain, and a 20% is for sales and marketing, and resulting in a profit of 20% profit margin. So you can imagine that how important it is to manage the efficiency and productivity of supply chain to ensure that we end up profitably. But if we buy incorrectly or there are issues in the inventory, it will have a disaster effect on the profitability of any organization. So, so all the supply chain managers, they must understand the criticality of their decision and their impact on the working capital and the impact on cash flow as to whenever they are doing planning, production planning or material planning, they need to ensure that they are within the policy of working capital. I'll come to that in a moment. So this is the uh, just showing you the importance of supply chain costs. So, for example, this net sales is 100 million. The supply chain cost that we saw in the earlier diagram is 60 million. The gross profit, which is the difference between 100 and 60, is 40 million. Marketing and services sales is 20 million, and the profit is 20 million. What I'm trying to show here is the importance that if you can reduce your supply chain cost by 3%, the impact of that cost reduction is a 9% increase in the profit. So this is very important that, and this was also taught by one of my new finance director who came in and studied Unilever Pakistan, and he came up with that even 1% cost reduction can result in a significant increase in the profitability. So this is so as you can see that when the margin is about 40%, a 3% will result in a profit increase of 9%. So this is how critical it is, and it will happen. It can have a similar effect that if you increase the cost by 3%, then the cost of the profit will actually go down by 9%. So this is where the finance people and the supply chain professionals and managers need to work together as to manage the cost and to manage the costing so that um, profitability achieved. One of the best practices in Unilever was that every year they would give a challenge to the supply chain people and the finance people to work together and come up with a saving of 2% per year. And I was part of it. So every year we would strive, and some years we will actually exceed it, and it will have a very uh, positive effect on the bottom line. So uh, you need to put in your organization. You need to put in a formal structure whereby one of the objectives of supply chain management is to ensure that uh, that they are able to come up with processes which um, can actually reduce the cost of total supply chain. In my next slide, I'm going to be showing that uh, throughout the supply chain, where's the investment is required. So as we said that in inventory, there are raw material inventory, packaging material inventory, and consumables. Uh, you need to ensure that you have the right level of inventory so that you don't run out, and therefore you must set the right standards, and this will depend on your lead times. And this is where the operational research comes in, the techniques about the MOQ or the economic order quantity, etc. I'm not going in those details, but those tools are used to determine the inventory level. The other supplier, you actually engage with your supplier and obtain as much financing as possible. So it could be a term for 60 days or 90 days or even 120 days. And sometimes when you are importing, it can go up as much as 180 days. So this is a great source of financing, which reduces the working capital. One thing which is negative is that advance payment, sometimes the supplier, because you're making something special for him, for yourself, they will require some advance payment. Generally, advance payment is required in big construction projects, etc., where mobilization funds are required, but they are not common in raw material purchases, etc., or packaging material. There is a industry standard um, payable days available to you, and a good procurement manager will negotiate a good credit period for the organization. So, in the factory area, you need a storage space and you need production facilities and plant and machinery. So, these are the investments there. And in finished goods, also, uh, you need a finished good warehouse and also investment in finished goods. So again, there are different standards for each. So for example, companies would like to keep 1 month stock in their premises, and say and maybe 1 to 2 months stock with the distributor, to ensure that the stock is available at the retail level, to all the customers, to all their customers. So this actually depends on the company policy, but most of the companies will try and minimize inventory at their own end, and they will want to ship out uh, maximum inventory to the distributor level. Again, money is required and tied up in customer receivables, and also money is required for the outbound logistics. So across the uh, supply chain, money is involved across the chain, as we saw. Uh, so it's the biggest cost structure in the organization and also requires considerable funding. And we'll go into detail as to how the funding is actually, what are the best funding in my next slides. Next is a very important concept called cash conversion cycle. Here you can see that the company starts with initial investment in cash. It buys materials and services, converts them into saleable goods. Then you have to pay your suppliers, and then you make a sale, and then you actually get money back. So this is a called cash cycle. Now the idea is to reduce this cash cycle as much as possible. I'll just show you an example. So for example, the current policy of the company is um, that they are maintaining inventory for 90 days, and uh, their receivables are like 60 days, and their payable days are 30 days. So the total cash conversion cycle comes to 90 plus 60 and minus days payable, and it becomes 120 days. So the company will receive back its investment in inventory and production after 120 days. And this seems to be like a industry standard, that people were maintaining 90 days inventory, and sales were relaxed, and they were taking time in collecting money like 60 days, and then but they were paying their suppliers in 30 days. So that's rather odd that the company has to finance um, for 120 days before it. So if a company is sales are 100 million and the cost of material is 40 million, and the contribution margin becomes 100 minus 40 60, then we can actually calculate what is the working capital requirement, or what will be the working requirement. So for 90 days, um, the inventory works out to be 10 million. This is 40 divided by 60 multiplied by 90 will give you 10 million. Then you have sales. The sales receivables is based on the sales value here. So again, you divide 100 by 360, multiply by 60 will give you 16.7 million. Days payable will be worked out on the cost of material. So this is 30 days. So 40 divided by 360 multiplied by 30 will give you 3.3. So the net value that you are coming, your working capital will be 10 plus 16, 26 million minus 3 million will give you a 23 million working capital tied up. Um, and supposing a new finance director comes in and he says, well, I don't like this. I've got too much money tied up. Like my 23% of my sales value is always stuck up. I need to release that money. So he negotiates with internally first that we must reduce the inventory to 45 days based on, uh, for example, just in time inventory or um, more frequent shipment. We can bring it down to 45 days. And similarly, he pushed the sales guys to receive money early from 60 days to 30 days and asked the procurement manager to increase the uh, credit period from 30 days to 45 days. So now what will happen is that the revised cash conversion days would be it, inventory outstanding would be 45 days, sales outstanding would be 30 days, and the days payable outstanding would be 45 days. So if you add up 45 plus 30, 75 minus 45, so there's a huge change in the cash conversion cycle. Previously, it was 120, and now it's reduced to 30. So it is pretty aggressive. But if you are an efficient organization and you command a good market, then you will probably be able to. And like FMCG and pharmaceuticals are actually on advanced cash model, that they first take the cash in and then actually ship out the product to the market. So that is quite amazing. So this will be probably yeah, it will be zero, or sometimes it's negative in the sense that there is a lag between when money is actually received and money and the shipment when it takes place. It could be a lag of 7 days or 3 days. So you would have a negative days sales outstanding here. So the impact on the cash flow for that particular year when you are making this change becomes um, 5 million generated from inventory reduction, 8.3 million generated from receivable reduction, and payable. Actually, this should be a positive signs payable because you're increasing days. It should it would actually result in an increase in cash flow because you're delaying payment, and the whole thing would add up. So it will be actually 13. Actually, it would be 18 million generated and not 8 million because of this negative sign, incorrect negative signs. So you can imagine that the company will have a free 18 million cash generated, and if your cost of capital is 10%, then you can actually make a gift from supply chain. People would be 1.8 million to the company. So next, I come to a concept called supply chain finance. It's a technique which works in collaboration with the supplier and a bank and the company. And together they come out with a process whereby everybody is a winner. So I will show it in, first of all, its definition, that it is the supply chain finance is a solution to optimize business cash flow and reduce cost in supply chain operations. And it is a collaboration between buyers, suppliers, and the financial institution. And you would have seen it in some text on the matter, or probably in many companies, it's already being used. And I will share the example at Unilever also. So what happens? There are three parties: the buyer, which is yeah, the company, the supplier, and the funding bank. So number one transaction, the buyer issues a purchase order. The supplier delivers the good to the company. The supplier also sends an invoice to the company. The buyer approves the invoice for payment and then sends it to the bank. And then the bank actually offers, and it says that the invoice is payable after 90 days, for example. And the bank then offers an early payment discount to the supplier, that okay, your payment is due in 90 days, would you like an early payment? And the supplier accepts early payment, and the bank then funds early payment to the supplier. And then so supplier is very happy, he gets the money quickly, but there is a discounting charge involved. And the supplier and the buyer then actually pays the money after 90 days to the bank, or they can also negotiate to extend the bank. So in this way, the buyer company or yourself as a company manager, you are able to get extended credit and reduce your working capital, and the supplier also is able to get the money early. So this is how it happens. I'll just show you in another example, which is simpler mode. It's the same concept, but the it is shown in a much easier manner. So the customer is here. The supplier provides services or goods to the customer, and the supplier actually provides the invoices to the customer as per the contract. What the customer does is that the customer sends the invoices to the bank for the payment, and the bank actually makes the payment less the discount, and then the customer pays to the bank afterwards after 90 days or something. So again, both supplier is happy and the customer is happy that they are able to supplier is able to get the money early, and customer is able to also get supplier financing. So in terms of if you look at this diagram, this was the normal before and after. So before, the buyer actually um, is the same diagram. You would see that after purchase order, they receive the goods, and the supplier sends the invoice, and the customer would pay after 90 days. Uh, but after the discounting process, what happens that the supplier is able to get money quickly. So that payment term, which you can see over here, is like 90 days. Here he can receive in 15 days, for example. So this is called invoice discounting, and the buyer actually initiated and funded the early payment program. If you look at the key benefits, again, it's a win-win scenario for all the participants. So there is immediate access. The supplier gets immediate access to cash. His receivables is reduced. His cash flow is improved, and he gets a lower financing cost. And there is no receivable on his balance sheet. Same for buyer. He gets a lower cost of goods sold, lower supply chain risk, uh, longer days payable, and they used financial strength as a competitive advantage. So, for example, in Unilever, financially very strong, plus blessings by the parent company in the UK, we were able to negotiate very fine discount rate from the bank, like 0.5% or less than 0.5% sometimes, as the discounting charges, which would which would be lower than the financing cost. It's also good for the bank that the bank gets into a new source of revenue. It's called intermediation into supply chain, and it can open new income from financing and also new customers. So it's equally beneficial for the three parties. So the costs and the risk are lowered in the supply chain, and the working capital is optimized for all the parties. So an example from Unilever was that tea was imported from Kenya and East African countries, and they were being supplied some 90 days, some 60 days. Um, so Lipton and Brooke Bond tea gardens were there, and also um, so there was an opportunity. The interest rates in Kenya were lower than what was happening in Pakistan. So there was an opportunity to get a lower discount rate in Kenya and get extended financing for Unilever Pakistan. So instead of paying in 60 days or 90 days, we were able to have a use and sell of 180 days. Similarly, for uh, palm oil was being imported from Indonesia and Malaysia. And again, it was like 90 days payment term of use and sell. There also there was an opportunity, and the credit period was extended from 90 days to 180 days. Now, this simple change by a new finance director enabled the company to generate a mountain of cash, and they were able to finance and fund a new ice cream factory um, uh, in Pakistan, just because they changed the working capital process and financing. We were able to generate this kind of money, which enabled them to undertake a new business out of their own resources rather than injecting any equity um, or borrowing. Now I'm going to be moving to individual parts of the supply chain assets that require financing. So the first one is the manufacturing facilities. And here I need to reduce the size a bit, but it's not allowing me. Okay, so manufacturing facilities is one of the largest investments in the total supply chain. And what you need to do is because this is a permanent investment, so ideally it would be based on a mix of equity as well as a long-term loan, a favorable long-term loan. So, for example, if the plant is 100 million, uh, one can say that because you're going to be able to generate cash, what can do is partially fund it from equity and partially fund it from loan, because loan you are able to pay back. So it could be a 60-40 ratio, it could be a 70-30 ratio, depending on the funds available. Generally, in finance, debts are considered cheaper cost of capital, and the reason being that the tax laws in many countries allow the interest as tax deductible, whereas dividends are not tax deductible. So this makes debts cheaper source of finance, and therefore the financial textbooks will actually teach you to maximize um, and borrowing. And sometimes, some companies even go, and it's called gearing. Sometimes their capital structure is like 30% equity and 70% is um, debt. Now, this increases the risk, financial risk of the organization. And supposing in a business cycle, 1 year is not so good, then there is a massive issue that if you still even if your business is not doing well, you still have to pay the interest, and that increases the financial risk. So a good finance director or a CFO actually sees how much is the business risk and how much, what should be an ideal uh, capital structure. So when you're doing a factory, look for other benefits also that is being offered by the company and by the country. For example, they have special economic zones where they can have 10 years tax holidays. Um, that would, but most importantly, a location uh, decision is based on that which optimizes the logistic cost. So it should be nearer to the customers. If you're doing exports, then you should be close to a seaport like Mumbai or Calcutta or Karachi, for example. um, Also, one of the factors is that you can look in the financial market and lock favorable long-term fixed interest rates, which actually reduces the risks. But then you have also need to consider that there is a risk that interest rate may go down also. So fixed rates are sometimes lower, but they also carry a risk that the overall market interest rate can actually go down. So one has to take a view on that. So after factory, the next big item is plant and machinery. Um, and again, because there is a large investment in plant and machinery, one will have a blend of, again, equity and long-term loan. Sometimes leasing is also available, and the leasing might be available from the supplier. So in this case, for example, a car manufacturer can actually lease. Um, so, for example, all the car manufacturers are investing in robotics, and it's a pretty high investment. Then they can, instead of buying or borrowing, they can actually arrange a lease payment. Um, this can be very, very effective. And the other factors that one should consider when buying plant and machinery is that you buy from machinery with favorable exchange rates. For example, um, that countries where the exchange rate is favorable, for example, Italy, Jap- even Japan and China, where the exchange rates are stable, uh, you should buy from them. Otherwise, there is an exchange risk, that if the value of currency goes up significantly, then cost of machinery will also go up. Also, we saw pandemic affecting the global supply chain. So, and also geopolitical risk needs to be considered when we are making purchase decisions. So these factors are have to be considered when we are actually investing in plant and machinery. So in future, you'll require consumables and spares. So you need to ensure that there will be no sanctions for those countries. So this is one factor that you have to consider. Next is your inventory. This is again another very large item. You have raw material, packaging material, you have consumables, and some are imported with long lead times. And sometimes the MOQ is also pretty large. So your MRP systems, your ERP systems will be able to optimize the inventory level. Um, Toyota invented the just-in-time inventory that all these vendors will supply inventory items as per the shift production shift required, and this is an ideal scenario. But then large supermarkets like Tesco and Walmart, etc., they are also trying to follow the GIT system, and they want to have a minimum inventory because they don't have space to ensure. I mean, in a supermarket, for example, and they would rather display the finished goods on the shelf, in the retail shelf, and not have storage for inventory items. So they require the vendors, the suppliers, that they should manage the shelving. So that's called the just-in-time inventory. And again, inventory um is actually a permanent inventory, and then there is uh, an inventory that fluctuates. So are you so so here the optimizing factors can be that we import again inventory from countries with low inflation, giving stability in cost, and also looking at to diversify sourcing to mitigate disruption, for example, in pandemic. So a good procurement manager will have two or three sources, two different sources, so to ensure that there is a continuity of supply. Next is financing operating cost. And again, here, because this is also a permanent operation, you will have a blend of equity and long-term financing, as well as working capital loans you can get from the bank. It's a revolving credit facility. So when you have surplus cash, you actually pay back the working capital loan. It's also called bank overdraft. So you can take the bank overdraft that allows a need basis financing. Um, and one can take loan from a low interest rate, from money market with low interest rate. Sometimes you're able to attract, because of your financial strength, you may be able to negotiate a low interest rate loan. But generally, these kind of loans are channeled via the commercial banks who offer money market sometimes at a cheaper rate. Then we come to financing logistics. So here again, trade credit would be used and freight financing solutions that you are actually negotiating a longer credit period from the freight operator. So, for example, Walmart can negotiate better credit terms with their logistics provider. Um, Exporters can actually use factoring for early payment on the shipped goods, and other optimizing factors could be that you are able to optimize logistics cost via favorable exchange rates. And you can hedge against political risk by diversifying the routes. Sometimes during exceptional period, like currently in Middle East, the ships are being routed uh, via uh, across the South Africa. Lastly, some points that when you're doing supply credit, negotiate extended credit terms with your supplier. You can implement some kind of discounting program with your customers also for early payment. Um, and we saw some examples that FMCG companies like Unilever actually extended supplier payment via bank collaboration. Um, Optimization factors can include that to minimize cost fluctuation, import supplies using exchange rate hedging strategies, and also leverage partnership with suppliers in strong economies. In terms of optimizing the supply chain financing, factors that you need to consider are interest rates, exchange rates, GDP growth, um, current account balances, political conflicts, and sometimes pandemics. So you as a supply chain professional, you need to work with your finance partners, finance business partners, and see what is the how can you manage the risk. So the key takeaways is that to emphasize is to take a holistic view on supply chain finance strategy, establish a long-term alliance and relationship with key vendors and customers, and then also align financial tools with supply chain and with corporate objectives. And we always need to be staying agile, resilient amidst global challenges, and keep looking for opportunities to optimize cash flow. So, this is all from my side. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Fantastic session, Mr. Khalid. Thank you very much. It's really very interesting to hear the finance part of the supply chain. So, and how I think you covered almost all parts of the finance which are useful for the supply chain managers.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so it is a fantastic event. Okay, so you touched about the profitability, cash to cash cycle. You talk about the financing options. You also talk about uh, the problem is the supply chain managers don't pay much attention to supply chain accounting part and finance part. Okay, so eventually they have to do it, but that is something which they try to ignore in the initial phase. But at the end of the day, they will pay the price if they don't manage their finances very well. Okay, and
Yeah,
learning and managing finance parallelly along with their supply chain makes them more competitive. Okay,
right.
uh, fantastic session. I think it's very heavy. You covered majority of the points. So would you like to
Thank
give
you.
like a top four or top five or the top three takeaways for supply chain managers to pay attention in coming days in 2025? Mhm.
Yeah, I think together with your, first of all, your finance people are not your auditors. They are actually there to help you. So you must, first of all, supply chain people must have a finance business partner in their organization. Because a lot of analysis is required, and a lot of data is already available in the ERP system. So, in order to truly get advantage of the ERP system data, you need a good financial analyst role, which can actually tell the financial impact of the decisions that are being taken, and also help in actually reporting the performance of the supply chain, um, so procurement, production, logistics, etc. So all their performance needs to be measured, and this can be best done by a finance business partner. And you need to keep on looking at the external environment as to what is happening in the global scenario. So, a change in the US president can have a different impact on the world geopolitical effect, which can affect the economies, and this can affect supply chain sometimes. Sanctions in your vendor's country can impact your supply chain. So, they need to stay alert as to what is going outside, and they must have a risk-based approach, and then that they are able to um, source their material uh, from different countries or from different suppliers, and also They must have a business continuity plan, which is very rare in most of the companies, that they don't have a business. In case of emergency, in case of some major disaster in their production facility, what will the business do? So they must come up with plans and actually have. So risk management is part of supply chain function, and also very much of finance function. So the whole idea is that we must have an integrated planning approach with sales, marketing, finance, and supply chain. We have to work as a team. And this is best done in a very effective SNOP process. And I'm sure that there are some very good software available which will help the organization to understand the data. The data is, there's too much data around. Um, and to make a sense of that, you need a good analytics software which can actually guide you as to where are the high risk areas which you need to understand and take action.
Perfect. 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 So
Thank you.
you also talk about the cash to cash cycle. So it is the importance of having the positive cash to cash cycle. Okay. The more you manage your cash to cash cycle, you have a more disposable cash at your hands. Okay. So
Absolutely.
that is something very, very critical. Many people don't worry about it. Uh, and you also, especially in the exports and imports, they
Yeah.
maintain a very cash to cash cycle. Yeah.
Sometimes the tenders, government tenders, and it takes very long to recover because of the very long payment processes, etc. So sometimes you have to actually see whether a tender business is a good business, or exports also sometimes it's very long collection period. So you need to evaluate whether it makes good sense, because tender is a low margin, high volume, and it can eat up your inventory for your retail business. So it is always debatable that the sales guys also want to make a quick, large sale in a tender, but it can have a very
Negative.
impact on negative impact on the business operation and supply. Uh, on the supply side, also, you can run out of the inventory for your normal customers.
Correct. So fantastic insights, Mr. Khalid. Thank you very much for joining all the way from Pakistan and giving us such
Thank
a
you.
wonderful lecture on supply chain finance.
Thank you
Fantastic.
so much.
I really
Thank
learned
you.
a lot. Very much,
Thank you
sir.
for
Thank you
the
very much.
opportunity. Thank you.
So the questions from the audience will be directly diverted to you to answer
Right.
offline. Anybody wants to contact Mr. Khalid for any clarifications, questions, or help or something, so please feel free to write to us. So we will just try to connect to Mr. Khalid.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, sir. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. It's a truly enjoyable session what we had this
I'm
evening.
looking forward to I'm looking forward to Gary's presentation, Gary
Yeah,
Hawkins's
yeah,
presentation.